Based on reviewing the answers for the class, I think it would be helpful if I make some comments, record on the assignment for week 1, which was titled as Basic Assignment. And here what I want to do is to obviously not spend too much time, but to at least make some general comments that will be hopefully helpful for you as you are going through the class. The very first one is that many of you have done a very good job, but there are some of you who appears, at least when I look at your submission for the assignment, that you may not have read the assigned chapters, especially for that you need for this assignment. And I would recommend that if the chapters are assigned, that you read it, because it's definitely going to help you answer the questions. For example, when you look at the 1A, which is what are the 4 ways I say to minimize risk, and again I do point out what I would look for is what is in the textbook, reading assignments. And most of you, I would say at least more than half of you, it looks like did read the book and have made some comments, but some of you have some more generic thoughts based on what you think the answer should be. And what I recommend as part of the learning process, it would be helpful that we stick to the reading assignments and the lectures and so on. For example, the ways to minimize risk would be diversification. So diversification is how you would minimize risk. Now, so the diversification means what? So what are some of the examples of diversification? One would be what is not putting all in one basket. But what does that mean for this particular course? What that basically means is that you do not want to put all your assets in one type of an asset. So what does that mean? That means that if you're investing, you want to, obviously, as you have learned as you're going through it, and you're going to learn more as you're going to go through the class, that the investment, which is the stocks, behave differently based on the economic environment, economic conditions, versus how the bonds behave, in terms of economic performance, economic conditions, so on. So these two behave differently, and in some ways they could offset one another. So if you're investing it, you would not put everything in stocks or everything in bonds, because they will move a different cycle. So you're diversifying a different two types of assets. Now, obviously, for folks who have quite a bit of money, they would even consider looking at another asset, which would be the real estate. To investing in real estate, because real estate would be moving differently depending on the economic conditions. So by having into 3 asset classes, obviously you can you're more diversified, and also some more sophisticated investor would also consider putting money in what's called the commodity. And the commodity example will be putting money in gold or silver and so on. So what this means over here is you're diversifying and putting into different asset classes. So asset classes basically means stock is an asset class, bond is an asset class, real estate is an asset class, and obviously commodity is an asset class. Okay. Now, even inside each one of them, they would behave differently. For example, if I take a stock, you don't want to, even if you decide, somebody says, okay, I'll do is to maybe put, depending upon my age, I will put, let's say, about 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds, so I'm diversified. But inside 60%, you do not want to put all 60% of the money in one stock. What happens if the company has a problem? Then all of a sudden you lose everything. So even inside the asset class, you're going to further diversify, maybe in putting the money into different companies. And this is where, as you can read later on, some of you may already know, that's what the mutual fund does. Mutual fund, basically a stock mutual fund, which is targeting money in the stock market, but is spreading it over multiple stocks. Now, even on the bond side, you don't want to put all the money in the same one bond. You want to put bonds in different places. So you diversify. And again, as an investor, you don't have to go find 10 different bonds. You can, if you want to invest in the bonds, if you choose that 40% should be in the bond, you can find a bond fund that will be diversified, and you're gonna learn more about it as you read it. But at this level, what you've read in chapter 1, 2, and 3, you should be able to answer these questions. So The next one is describe the risk of not being in the market. The risk of not being in the market basically is that if you have money just sitting in cash, then what's going to happen is that your money will be, over the time, will be worth less. Because, let's say, for example, if today we are paying, $3.80, to buy something, tomorrow it probably will cost us maybe more. Next year may cost us $3.95, and so on. And 10 years from now, it's going to cost us even more. So, but not investing and letting the money sit in the cash, which is a safe thing to do, but just to be aware and be careful that going forward, that money would buy you less. Okay, now. Number C basically is basically kind of touching on what we said in B, but we are trying to quantify it. Now, what this means over here is that if I had $70,000 today, so we have $70,000 today, what is it going to be worth, first one is in 10 years. What is it going to be worth in 10 years? What is it going to be worth in 15 years? And what is it going to be worth in 20 years? Obviously, we know it's going to be worth less because we are buying power. What we can buy for $70,000 today is going to be less tomorrow, and hence and so on. So we know the number is going to be less than 70,000. The question is, how do we calculate it? Okay. Now later on in this thing, I have added some more detail, but here I'll tell you basically is what we're really looking to see, that if I have $100, just to keep the math easy, instead of saying 70,000, let's say $100 today. If the inflation is 3%, next year this will be worth $97. Okay, 3% taken on it. Now the question is, how do we figure out the year after that? The way you figure out year after that, you take the $97 and you're going to multiply it again by 1 minus 0.03. Okay, and you do the math and so on. I'll touch on a little later on. So I will stop here for that one. As far as the large cap and small cap, some of you, were very generic in your comment, and I think that would be not enough, especially as an MBA student. What you want to do is to obviously be more specific about it. Why large caps are safer or not compared to small cap. In general, large cap are more safer. Is, remember, when we are investing, the safety basically means is, will the company we are investing in will be able to pay us a profit in the long run? We will be able to give us some gains, a profitability. And obviously, larger the company, the chances are large companies can survive economic downturns better than the small companies. Why? Because they are more global, they are more diversified, they have, the balance sheets are stronger, which means they have more cash, they got better assets. Small companies, obviously, because of the fact that they're small, they don't have the experience in terms of number of years. They may not be as diversified into different global economies and so on. So typically, large caps would be considered, on average, a large cap are considered safer than the small cap. And the reason is because they are large, they can handle the ups and downs more. So that would be the more specific answer for that one. Okay. If I continue now with the number E, the government bonds and corporate bonds. Okay, the bonds obviously a different class. We said the asset is a class, bond is a class. So now within the bonds, which one would be safer? And obviously, just like stocks, if we are lending money to someone, be a corporation or to a government, the chances are, who do we think is going to give it back to us? So obviously, if you're lending it to U.S. government, they are backed up by U.S. government, so they are safer. Giving money to a company ABC, company XYZ, we don't know if they're going to survive or not. If you get a 10-year bond from United States Treasury, that means we're lending money to them for 10 years. We're going to make interest for 10 years, and then we'll get the money back. Versus lending money to a corporation for 10 years, no guarantee if the company will survive. I mean, look at companies that have gone belly up, or even companies that are okay now. A few years ago, they were in deep trouble, like General Motors and so on. So that's why corporate bonds are riskier, because there is no guarantee as much as you can get guarantee from the government. So that would be the answer. Now, stock versus bond, to be more specific, and you have to be more specific in answering all these questions. That's why I'm recording it for all of you, and especially some of you do have some learning gaps based on your responses. So the stocks, the reason bonds are safer on a relative basis is because you're lending money, along the way you're making some interest, and as long as the company is there, does not go bankrupt, they will give you principal back. Stocks, on the other hand, you can borrow. I mean, you can buy a stock, and nothing may happen. As far as for 10 years, stock may stay where it is. At least in the bonds, you're getting some interest. And there is no guarantee. If the company does not do well, the stock will not do well. And I think, as you have probably seen some of the examples, if you look at some of the company like BlackBerry, which was the smartphone device company that was doing so well 5 years ago, look at it today, the stock price is worth less than 90% of what it was worth before. So obviously stocks are more riskier because there is no interest being paid, and hence we're not making any money while we're holding the money. At the same time, if the company does go belly up, the people who are the debt holders or the bond holders have a first right to the assets, and the stockholders comes next. And most times there's not money left for the stockholders if the company goes bankrupt. So that would be the specific answer. Okay. Now, the next one is basically looking at the just basically the numbers, and I'm just want to do is to maybe go down. Look like. So let's look at the. I said earlier that I was going to talk about the 1C. Okay. Now this I do agree. At this stage of the game, it is a bit tricky, but some of you were able to at least get your head around it, and if you did not get it now, the reason I threw this in, even though it is only worth 5% of the whole thing, so it's not a lot. It's only 5 out of 100 points. But it is still important concept to comprehend, and I think as you're looking at this week's assignment, which is the time value of money, I think you're going to start to appreciate it even more. And so I wanted to throw in a problem that ties in with week 1, but also scaffolds or links into week 2. So the problem was that if Jill has $70,000 and she keeps it in cash, what would the buying power be? What would the buying power be, 10 years, 10, 15, or 30 years from now? There are a couple of ways to do it. Let me show you the easiest way to do it with Excel, which is this method over here. And the reason I'm pointing this thing out is because by now you've already basically done or have looked at the problems for time value of money, so you basically are using Excel. So with Excel, what we want to do is we want to calculate the future value. We want to calculate the future value, and you should know how to do that. At least if you did not know it for week 1, you should know it now in week 2 and week 3 as you go forward. So the present value is $70,000. The rate would be negative 0.03. Okay. And basically all that means is that the value is being deflated by 3%. If you wanted to see if I'm putting $70,000 in a bank and it gives me 3%, obviously the number 3% will put it as positive. But because inflation is depreciating the value of our $70,000, the number is negative. So in 10 years, the buying power will only be 51,619. 15 years, 5 years even longer, obviously worth even less. So by the time you get to 20 years, it's down to, almost half. Or 70 is almost half to 38,000. Okay, that's the way you will do it. Now, from a conceptual perspective, I will talk about method 1, but I was again suggesting you would use this thing. And again, the reason I'm suggesting the number 2 is because it ties in with the stuff that we are learning, in the future weeks. Now, if you wanted to do it, basically, the method over here is that let me just kind of make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. We are dropping by 3%. So let's say we have 100. So in 1 year, it will drop to what? 100 times 0.97. Why did I use 0.97? 0.97 basically is obviously 1 minus 3%, which is 0.03, and you would get 0.97. That's how I got 0.97. If the deflation was 4%, then this obviously would have been 0.6. If the deflation was 5%, this would have been 0.95. But right now we have 3%, so we are going to use 1.03, and so we are multiplying a 0.97. So multiply 0.97. First year, obviously, I am going to get 100 times 0.97. I'll get, $97. Okay, so year one is $97. Now, if I wanted to go the next year, again, I will again multiply it by 1 minus 0.03, which obviously is still 3%, so it's going to be 9%. So multiply 0.97, I'll get that. If I continue to do that for 10 times, I will get this number, which is what I've shown you using the Excel, right? Now, if I wanted to use this methodology in Excel, obviously I will take and figure out the factor. The factor will be that if I am deflating it by 3%, which means the number should be 0.97, which is 1 minus 0.03, I would raise it to 10. In the Excel, the raise thing is this symbol over here, which is one of the on the keyboard, and you will get this number. And so basically all this means, if I got 100 in 10 years, it will be worth $73.74. Okay, so if I got 70,000 type number, and that's what I get. Okay, so again you can use it this way, which or you would use Excel, which Excel obviously is easier. Now for the next one, which was basically easy, and I think the only people who had issues with that one is because they did not do, which I had suggested, actually required to use Excel. And I think so there was some math issue, and the reason I had recommended to use Excel, it is required for the class, more important, and avoids you with some math issue. But anyways, the punchline over here is very simple. We have a bunch of assets, we have a bunch of liabilities, if you add them all up, and typically you will expect somebody at the year 25, they will have more debt versus assets, so they will probably in the negative net worth, because they'll have student loans, etc., etc. With time, as the students' loan go down, maybe they start to build some money over the next few years. By the time they're 35, they may have picked up now some more home mortgage. So home mortgage is still debt, so they may be down to 60, and as they get older, they're going to start to get positive. But anyway, so the punchline is you would add up all your assets, and you're going to subtract from liabilities, and you will get your net worth. And that's how you would do it. And most of you did it. Some of you, a couple of you did have an issue with that, had to do with you did not use Excel. Now, and the other learning over here is that we would expect for individuals that obviously very young, let me just change the color, very young, you may have student loan, but may not have any mortgage, and you have mortgage, and with time, as you're paying some principal off, the mortgage will drop. So typically what happens is that if you really think about it as we go through our life and journey, that if I look at time, time is number of years, and if I look at the net worth for us, and if I draw a line at 0, typically when we start out, we are going to be at a negative net worth. Why? Because we have more debt than we have assets, student loan, car loan, etc. And then as with time, we may still have loan, but now through putting money in a 401k, paying some of the principal off for a loan, eventually we'll get to the 0, and then we're going to become positive. And this is so by the time you're ready to retire, you should have a good set of positive numbers, and that's going to become part of your portfolio for investing, for retirement, and so on. Okay. The next one was just kind of looking to say, okay, if I wanted to learn how to do the calculation. And so the problem I basically gave you was that somebody has, 3 shares for 3 companies, and what would here are the, price at that time. They bought 100 shares, and that's what they invested. Okay, if the price today is this. The current portfolio obviously basically would be the same time. This would be the price we have today, and number of shares is still the same 100. So we get these numbers over here. And so I'm just going to make it easy to read. Okay. These numbers over here, and then change will be, how much did it change? Obviously this one, because the price for the first one has gone down, was 35, now it is 32, the other two have gone up, so obviously you'll expect the increase for that one to be negative, the other to be positive. And to figure out what the percent change would be is how much did we make or lose. So for example, the first one would be minus 220, and we started with 35.40, then the answer would come out to be minus 6.2%. Okay, And similarly, the other one, if I wanted to see this one, I would take 710, which is the money, it is up today, compared to what we invested, which was 3010, and we would get 23.6%. Okay, 23.6%. So that's the number, and that's how you would do it. And so now, if you, one of the thing that was required to do was what about the total? What would the total portfolio go up? But that's in some ways obviously easy to do. All we do is to say, okay, my total investment that I invested, you add this number up. Okay, I have that. Total current portfolio, how much is it? I know how much I have that, and based on that, we can figure out how much did the total portfolio change. And once I know what my total portfolio changed, and I know what I had invested, I can take this number, let's call this D1, $1, the money that we have, the portfolio is up by or down by. In this case, will be up because there are more positives than negatives. And we divide it by what we started out with. Let's call that, say, for example, $2. And if you do that, obviously you will get a number, and the number will turn out to be 8.7%. So I hope this was helpful. And so